Greetings, it's Carol Hunter, the Money Mender, and we are back for day 3 of your complimentary training for the Be Free by 2020 challenge. And we are at the halfway point, so it's going to get exciting as we go higher and higher. So on day 1, let's do a recap. We dealt with your money reality check, and of course that brought on some emotion, more than likely. And then secondly, we dealt with facing your money fears and figuring out ways to get you out of your financial paralysis. And so on day 3 of the training, we are going to dive into discovering your money DNA. And I'm sure you're probably saying, what is money DNA? I know what DNA is, kind of, sort of, but what is money DNA? Well, I'm so glad that you asked the question because I am going to introduce you to that. But before I reveal the answer to you, I want to provide you with a brief overview of DNA in general. You know, what does that really mean? What is DNA from a biological perspective? Because that's normally when we hear the term DNA, when we're talking about something as it relates to our physical body. So in a general sense, DNA is a segment or a substance that carries the genetic code that makes us unique or different. So it's what makes up our uniqueness. You know, all of us, there's nobody else like Carol Hunter, the Money Mender. There's only one me. Nobody else has the DNA genetic code that I have. No one ever can, no one ever will. So as it relates to our DNA, it controls your personality and the behaviors which come from an interplay between your genes and your environment. So whenever we hear this word gene, that's the root word of genetics. So remember, your DNA carries your genetic code. So root word gene, that's that segment of DNA. That's the substance that carries the genetic code. And every person has 2 copies of each gene that you inherit from each parent. So you get one from your mom, you get one from your dad. You're probably thinking, where is she going with this? I thought this was about me being free by 2020. Well, hold on, I'm gonna take you there. So then that brings up heredity. You know, your what do you inherit as it relates to these genes that you receive from your mom and your dad? Because heredity is the process of a parent passing certain genes or DNA to their children, which then predisposes us to our unique qualities, our characteristics, our behavior. And this is the origin of the physical you. So your DNA, your genetic code, when people say, oh, you have a nose just like your dad, oh, your eyes, you look just like your mother. The older I get, literally, daily, I transform into a replica, a duplicate of my mom. We could be twins. The only difference is I'm 58, she's 85. But the older I get, and I believe of all my 4 siblings, I have the most dominant genes from my mom than any of my other siblings, because if you put us side by side, you would think, oh, wow. So we're going to use this information now that I gave you regarding genetics and DNA and heredity and inheritance. We're going to do an analogy now so that I can help you understand what your money DNA is and how you came into being, or how your money DNA was developed, and why you are like you are and do what you do with money. Because it has an origin, it has a starting point. So your money genetics, you know, that's the gene that causes the genetic code for your money. And it is inherited from the environment that you were influenced by the most. So in other words, your DNA, you know, the gene, the segment of DNA, that's what, you know, DNA, that segment of DNA, that's your gene, and it's carried from your genetic code, and it is inherited from the environment that you were predisposed to, I'm going to go as far as to say, before you became an adult and began to manage your own money. Now remember, DNA is passed on. It's inherited from your parents. So your money DNA was inherited from your environment. The environment that you were in created the DNA or the genes that formed your behavior and your personality, your money personality, your money behavior. So your money DNA then is your financial behavior. It's your money relationship. It was inherited because you were exposed to an environment that allowed you to inherit what was passed on from what you were exposed to. So I asked this question then: what money practices do you remember from your childhood that you now recognize in your adult self? See, when you ask that question, it begins to shed light on what I just shared with you about your money behaviors. What is it that you saw your mom or your dad or your grandma, whoever you spent the most time with, whoever you experienced money with the most, what do you see in yourself? And so how do your parents manage money? Or if they're deceased, how did your parents manage their money? What do you remember? Let me share my story, my authentic truth, because it's important on this journey that we get really honest with ourselves and our, experience. So my dad left us. My mom had 4 kids. So my dad left when I was 8 years old. So I was the second of 4 children. So we were age 13, 8, 6, and 9 months old. So my dad left my mom with an infant, a toddler in her arms. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. She was a homemaker. She had not yet gone to college. She always wanted to, but at that time of her life, she had not. She didn't work. She didn't have any money, and he abandoned us. So I grew up watching my mom manage with a small amount of cash flow, because when he left us with no car. He left the rent behind. He left no money. He just left. We probably didn't have anything to eat either. So my mom had to go out and immediately get employment like the next day. And we received partial we received partial assistance from the welfare system in the United States of America. I don't know if they have those systems in other countries. And then we received food stamp assistance, because my mom had a lot of pride. She did not want 100% assistance from any system. She wanted to carry her own weight to the degree that she could. And so she received partial assistance until she was in a position where she didn't need it anymore. So she used what's called the envelope system. And if you're not familiar with that, basically you take blank envelopes, you write on the outside rent, gas, food, child care, whatever you have to pay, and then you put money in those envelopes and you use that money at the time when those expenses are due. Once the envelope is empty, you're done until it's time to replenish. So my mom was not in a position where she could run to an ATM machine and say, oh, the envelope is empty, so I'll put some more money in it. No, when it was empty, it was empty. So that was my financial knowledge and my financial education as a child, watching my mom with this envelope system. I didn't totally understand it or even care about it when I was a child, but that's my greatest memory. So I come from very humble beginnings, both from, a money perspective, as well as having a lack of knowledge about things that I should have known. Because my father made incredible money when I was growing up. So we would have been considered an upper middle class family based on his income. But my dad, on the other hand, from my mom with the envelope system, my dad was very reckless and totally out of control with no financial discipline. So while all this money was coming into our house, it was being managed poorly. He was an alcoholic. He drank too much. He was a womanizer. So, I grew up with all of these things in my environment. So not only did I have my DNA as it relates to my money DNA, relationships, and all those other things were out of sync in terms of what I was inheriting. So I grew up watching my mom place money into these categories with envelopes. So here's the question that I have to ask myself as I share it with you. So watching my mom manage very little money, but providing for 4 children by herself after being abandoned, how is it that I end up graduating from college with 19 credit cards and over $30,000 of consumer debt, unsecured debt? How is it that I ended up in that place? Well, remember what I said earlier? We inherit our DNA from both of our parents. We get DNA from 1, the mother, DNA from 2, the father. So my father, unlike my mother, was a poor money manager in every possible way. And even though I was raised with my mom, the DNA that passed from my father was obviously more dominant and more influential when I was dealing with my credit addiction, because that's what I had. I had an addiction to credit, and exposed my abusive financial behavior. You know, that's what that addiction did. It exposed it. It caused me to be abusive. Just like a person that is addicted to drugs, they abuse drug, or if they're addicted to alcohol, they abuse alcohol. I was addicted to credit until my late 20s. I had a credit addiction. Now, I don't have time to go through all the gory details about the origin of my credit addiction as it relates to these complimentary trainings. But, you know, if you stick with me throughout the year, I'm very transparent about my story. I'm very authentic about my financial truth, from my humble beginnings to my wealthy place, you know, walking in a lifestyle, living in a lifestyle of money freedom. So you'll eventually hear that. But, you know, like my father, here's what I want you to hear, because we're talking about genetics and inheritance. Like my father inherited his money DNA from his dad, I inherited mine from my dad for a season. See, my grandfather, so that would be my dad's dad. My grandfather left my grandmother with 6 children to raise by herself way back in the day. That probably would have been in the 1940s maybe. And he went on his own, started a whole new family on the other side of Alabama. So my grandmother, like my mother, was left with this responsibility to raise these children on her own with very little money. And the rest is history. Now, that's how I discovered my money DNA. And I want to help you discover yours. So I want to ask you some questions. So here are the questions that in day 3 of the training, I'm going to want you to take a look at. So the first one is, which of your parents influence your money behavior the most? When you look at how you manage money, deal with money, handle money, which one of your parents do you see the most? Is it your mom or your dad? Because that money genetic code was passed on from one of those parents. You're going to be more like one or more like the other. One is going to be more dominant than the other. It's not to say that you can't have a little bit of both, but one of them is going to be more dominant. The second question is, what do you know about the money genetics of your grandparents? Remember, I said that my grandfather left my grandmother with 6 children to raise by herself. This was back in the country in Alabama in the United States of America, and it's one of the southern states. And I know that my grandmother did not work, did not have a lot of money, was more than likely a homemaker. It had to be incredibly difficult to do that, but somehow she made it. So what do you know about the money genetics in your history, your family lineage? What is the money story? Because whatever your grandparents displayed to your parents, that's what they displayed to you, because that's what they knew. That's all they knew. And then the third question is, what money DNA are you passing on to your children. Inheritance. What will your children inherit? At this age right now, what have they inherited as it relates to your money DNA? Because if you've presented to them what your parents presented to you, which is what their parents presented to them, that's how legacy, generational curses, generational behavior patterns, that's how they manifest themselves, because they keep repeating themselves one generation after another. So it's important to note that money genetics are influenced by the environment that has the greatest dominance in your life, to include your family, friends, spouse, co-workers, neighbors, TV, social media. The influences can come from a whole lot of different places. You know, I remember in the 80s in the United States of America, everybody wanted to be prosperous because the country was supposedly prosperous at that time. But what I also remember as the money mender is people wanting to be prosperous before their time, if you will. And what that meant to most people was they lived in a house, possibly a really large home, and maybe in a gated community or an exclusive community with a, country club or whatever. They drove a high-end car. Their children went to private school. So all of those outward appearances indicated you were prosperous during that time. However, what I also know is, because I had clients that I was talking to that was stressed out about this prosperity, they were financing this lifestyle. They didn't have any money, but they were borrowing the money to be accepted. So that environment that they were exposed to, having to shop at certain stores and wear certain labels and carry certain bags and wear certain shoes, but this was all on credit. And so now here we are in the year 2019 in a Be Free by 2020 challenge. And for some people, some of that debt that you're carrying right now still stems from what was happening during those prosperity years. And then of course in the we had the recession in 2008, and that was a setback for a lot of people. And if you were already challenged, that set you back even more. So we have to be careful about the influences, because we pick up these traits and these habits in our environments. But by age 28, I had canceled the $30,000 of debt from college, created my personal financial management system, which is still operational and powerful today, which is a part of my debt-free kit. That's where that system lives. And I had also started mentoring people for free at my church to help them become debt-free. So again, I've been doing this for a long time. And so we're rolling the clock forward now, 31 years later. Just like I was teaching the free classes at my church and offering free mentoring to whoever would show up during the hours that I would just go to my church and be there to help people, here I am now 31 years later offering the Be Free by 2020 challenge so that I can help you. So by now you should have figured out, after these 3 days of training, that I have a passion and a love for helping people to live their best financial life. I love my work. And my work as the money mender, right now in this moment, in this challenge, I am absolutely determined to assist 20,000 or more women and a few men with becoming debt-free and achieving some level of money freedom by 2020. I am determined that by the end of this year, we will put a dent in the debt in every country for the people that participate in my Be Free by 2020 challenge. So it doesn't matter where you live. It doesn't matter what continent you live on. It doesn't matter whether you use dollars, whether you use pounds, or any other form of currency in the country that you live in. What I know is you can eliminate debt. I know that you can increase your money so you can have money freedom. And I know that it's your time if you are wanting to start a small business. I also know that it's your time to start your own business, because You are the investor of your business. No one else is the investor of your business. You are the investor, and we're going to get your money to that place. In addition, everything that was shared in the first 2 trainings, listen, I encourage you to continue doing the work and apply the information immediately into your life, because this is going to help you again discover the origin of your DNA. If you're not doing the money reality check, if you're not facing your fears, then you will have some challenges with really identifying your money DNA origin. You don't want to not know that. You want to make sure that you know that, okay? You want to make sure that you know that. So, if you have kids, assess your current money DNA. What are you presenting to them to determine if you are transferring financial behavior that is going to negatively impact their lives as adults? Remember, we're the mirror for the children, and they imitate what they see. They duplicate what they see. And if we don't do any self-correcting, then ultimately you will see that same behavior in your grandchildren. And if you live long enough, you will see it in your great-grandchildren. So don't ever forget that DNA is a genetic inheritance. You inherit your DNA. It's inherited. It's passed on to you. And unlike your biological DNA, here's the great news for today. Your money DNA can be modified. It can be changed. See, the DNA that I have from my mom and my dad from a biological perspective, that can't ever change. It is what it is. Now, yes, I can work on myself. So if I've got behavior that's not good, or, if my personality needs some development, that's why we have therapists and behavioral behavioral science in the world, so that we can kind of self-correct some things that may have gone awry in the womb, and then it, came out in the genes, and we act out in those ways. I'm not trying to be a therapist today, but I think you get what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is, if you're a hyper consumer or overspender, if you're a poor manager of your financial resources, if you overextend yourself, if you have more going out than more coming in, all of those things can be corrected. Those things can be changed. They don't have to stay. That's a matter of a decision. And that's why we're on this journey to be free by 2020, because it's going to tell you a lot. You're going to learn a lot about your money DNA, and then you will be able to understand those areas where you do need to do some correcting, and possibly even get some help if you're that out of control. So I enjoyed sharing my story, my truth about my money DNA. I come from very humble beginnings. I could have stayed in that place. I could have lived a life where it was always struggle and not enough money, and when the envelopes were empty, there was no more to replenish. But I made some different choices with my life, and I'm here to help you make some different choices with yours. And so with that being said, continue to work on your money reality check, address your money fears, because they're real, and take yourself out of this paralysis that you've been operating in. And then deal with your truth about your money DNA. It is what it is. If your family passed on some bad money DNA to you, or, it was not the healthiest financial environment, it's okay, because you don't have to stay there. And if you've already affected your children with it, it's not too late to self-correct for your children. So with that being said, I enjoyed being here. I always enjoy being here. And I believe I've shared everything I need to share with you for today, because you have quite a lot of work to do. So again, we're at the halfway point, and hopefully you're already feeling amazing, grateful, thankful, and even if you have a little bit of anxiety about this journey that you're on, it's okay, it's normal, because this is new, this is different. You're taking a leap, you're taking a big step, you're doing something you've never done before to have something you've never had before. So remember what I told you on day 2, when you have information, you have power. So you're empowering yourself by participating in this debt-free 2020 challenge. And listen, I encourage you to invite other people to join you on the journey. Now, not just anybody, but people that are going to be serious, because you don't want any stumbling blocks in your way. Someone saying to you, well, it doesn't take all that. You don't have to do all that to get to your debt-free place. Well, yes, you do. For a season, there will be sacrifices. For a season, it will be a little bit of pain because you're going through a metamorphosis. So think about the process of when a butterfly becomes a butterfly. Well, a butterfly is a caterpillar crawling on the ground for a season. Then it has to go through the cocoon phase, and then it comes out as this beautiful butterfly. Well, imagine that cocoon phase when that little fat furry body is being transformed into this little skinny body that is in the middle of those 2 wings that are beautifully colored, and now that butterfly is flying freely. Well, just think of this as your cocoon process of transformation, where you're going from financial dis-ease, lack of comfort, to freedom, where you have debt freedom, money freedom, life freedom, the power to choose. So again, I'm excited. I'm glad you're here. I'm excited to be here. I'm actually ecstatic. I mean, 20,000 people, 20,000 women walking into a new level of freedom by the end of this year and starting a new decade on a new level of freedom. How amazing and awesome is that? So you go ahead and have yourself a great day, and I look forward to returning again for day 4. Thank you. Bye.